I've seen in my experience a lot of times when teams don't work well with each other is either the vision is not communicated clearly, or two, if people are not clear about what is it that they are putting to the table. So I think as a leader, that is very important.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
Organizations today are more interconnected than ever, with teams spread across different functions, departments, and even geographies. Success no longer depends on individual expertise. It requires the ability to navigate the complexities and influence across the entire organization. As Eisenhower once said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he or she wants to do it. In large, complex organizations, true influence is not about authority. It's about collaboration, trust, and the ability to align diverse teams towards one shared vision. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by an experienced leader who has successfully built cross-functional influence in global organizations. He'll share insights on how to communicate across departments, break down silos, and drive meaningful impact, even without formal authority. So, if you're going to improve your ability to collaborate, lead, and influence in a complex business environment, this episode is for you. Our guest today is Mayank Agarwal, a strategic leader with over 15 years of pharmaceutical and biotechnology experience. He has navigated complex cross-functional dynamics in large organizations. Mayank has worked across industries, helping teams align their goals, communicate effectively, and drive business outcomes, regardless of reporting lines. Mayank, welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Rajat. Trust me, pleasure and thrill is all mine. I feel deeply honored to be invited to your episode, and I'm really looking forward to our talk today.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayank. So, Mayank, I think you and I have known each other for a little bit, but I think it'll be great for you to just introduce yourself to the audience and your experience as a cross-functional leader.
Absolutely. So I'll do a quick, brief intro. As Rajat mentioned, have about 16 plus years of commercial experience in life sciences industry. Particularly spent a lot of time among complex matrixed organizations that are delivering science and products, drugs to treat debilitating diseases. And over that experience, one thing which you're absolutely right about, Rajat, is the need to drive and navigate through a multifunctional environment, and oftentimes to lead without authority. And that's something I won't say that over the last 16 years I've become any sort of communication expert. I think I'm a student for life. But one thing that I do feel that in today's world, communication and using communication not just as a tool but as a skill to navigate through complexities of the organization, I think it is deeply underscored, according to me, in today's world.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayank. I love that. It's your humility to say you're a student of communication. And I like what you said, right? Over 93% of leaders want to improve the communication skills of their team. So I hear you, it's an important skill. So let's start from the basics, Mayank. Let's start with the challenge, right? So when we are working in a complex org and working cross-functionally, why is influencing across functions and cross-functionally so hard in large organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it fundamentally boils down to three reasons. Number one, organizations are becoming flatter than what it used to be a couple of decades or even a decade ago. And the reason for that is to move with agility. In a flat organization, you typically do not have the lines of authority that you are telling people. It's more about making the other people see what you see
What you see.
and influence without that authority. So I think that that first reason is flatter organizations. Secondly, I would say we are in an environment where we are working with multiple subject matter experts as opposed to one subject matter expert being asked for a task. And whenever you're in the case of multiple stakeholders who are, it's like, a lock has multiple keys versus one key.
Yeah.
And to find that key, you have to build that trust and confidence among the others. Hey, why am I sharing my key over to you? So that collection of keys is a process that you can drive through communication. And last but not the least, I just feel that we are getting into a more of a either or decision making versus both and decision making. And let me just exemplify that a little bit.
Yeah.
We do not know whether or not the implication of our decision, that whether we go ahead, pursue with an idea or not pursue with an idea, what is going to cost, because that's a long-term analysis. But what we are typically trying to do is, let's look at all the aspects, and perhaps there is a middle ground on moving further in an idea where we evolve and where we learn and be agile enough to make corrections as we go. So I think that third point is a little bit nuanced, from my experience, that we are not in an environment where we make binary decisions. We are making more of digital decisions in a more I'm an electrical engineer by training, so more of an engineering terminology there. It's more of a digital, decision making that we are entering into.
Okay, super. No, very interesting. I agree with those trends of orgs getting flatter, and love those analogies. So let me ask you this: when people try to influence cross-functionally, Mayank, in your experience, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that people kind of unwittingly get into, which they could avoid?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is to not develop and build that trust early on. And very early on in my career, one of my very early career mentors, who interestingly, came from McKinsey, shared with me a trust equation. Rajat, you may be aware of that, framework. And despite me coming from a consulting background, I really wanted to go deep versus just using that framework at the face of it. And that trust equation, had directly related components like building your credibility. Do you have the right credentials? Do you have the right skill set? Of course, the more credibility and credential you have, you automatically build trust. But in the matrixed organization, what people do not see as an important factor is the inverse relationship of trust to self-orientation.
Yeah.
And that self-orientation is, I think, in layman's term, can I make the other person put themselves in my shoes or put myself in their shoes, and then see that perspective. And that is the hardest component to overcome. But once that is overcome, that opens the floodgates of what you want to do. And that sort of goes into that area of influencing without authority. So, there's a huge element of trust building at the beginning, of navigating matrix organization.
Yeah. I love, Mayank, how you're bringing in some of the science concepts of being an engineer and now trust equation, and we leave the notes. And a link to the trust equation in the notes of the podcast. But trustworthiness, having spent 5 years at McKinsey, is the numerator is credibility, reliability, and intimacy. So how well do you know something? Are you reliable? And how have you built the relationship with who you're working with? And like you said, the denominator is self-orientation, right? So the more you are thinking about yourself and less empathy for the other person, it erodes trust. So thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about a little bit about the role of communication then, Mayank, right? So if it's about building trust, less self-orientation, more credibility, how does getting better at communication make you a better cross-functional collaborator?
Yeah, I think, look, fundamentally, there are two components of communication. I would say three components because I like to think in threes. The first one is written communication, right? Of course, that component is not going away. How concisely and accurately and succinctly you are putting across your thoughts to senior leaders, to your direct reports, to the cross-functional stakeholders. I think that is not going away. In fact, there are a lot of tools out there to make it more productive. To use AI and making written communication concise. The second one is oral communication, right? I think nowadays we are really faced with a huge challenge, which is people are, with all the productivity tools, they are not getting a time to connect with people through verbal connection. And by what I mean by that is there's just not enough time slots in the calendar to make that verbal connection. And I'm pretty sure, Rajat, you can agree to that, is that a 50 or 100-word email cannot compare to half an hour worth of having a verbal connect, because there are spaces where you're talking about your personal experiences. There are spaces where verbally you're communicating about like cultural sharing. I mean, there are times if there are only I come from India. If in a room, in a meeting, there are only Indians, the automatic mode of my verbal communication is Hindi, assuming that everybody speaks Hindi. And why is that? Because I'm able to put my point across not only professionally but also personally, and that really builds that trust. So that's the second component, right? Verbal communication, but we need more time for that.
Yeah.
And then the third component is sort of like that the ability to orient yourself to the goal of that task at hand for the objective of the function or the scorecard, and the ability to see that no matter like how we are communicating, either we are trying to ask something like as a dependency or a contingency, but our common goal is towards that scorecard. So the scorecard usually doesn't get communicated that often verbally or or written, but in my opinion, that is something that we should, not on a daily basis, but at least on a weekly basis, we should keep looking at the scorecard and see that am I pushing forward according to the goal that I've signed up for. And if everybody in the matrix organization does that, people assigned to a common goal, half the battle is already won.
Well said. People assigned to a common goal, half the battle is already won. And many times people don't know or agree on the common goal. So I like the third point, Mayank, about let's keep going back and keep looking at what that shared scorecard is. Might be helpful, Mayank, for the audience if you could share like a personal story of how you navigated influence in a cross-functional org, bringing some of these concepts together.
Yeah, I mean, I have tons of stories. Like one area that I will share, something recent, or at least in the last couple of years, which I've been very closely aligned to in my current function. And I'm gonna lose the details, just to make it more relevant for the audience here.
Yeah.
My goal as a head of commercial excellence was to bring efficiencies in a commercial operational process, at the same time make it compliant, so to mitigate the risk. And as you know, the life sciences industry, biotech and pharma, is heavily regulated. So that is an area that we constantly try to achieve is, excellence in
Yeah.
not only in commercial operations, but in also compliance. So I think very early on, like looking at that task, doing an analysis on the existing ecosystem and the existing system, I was very clear that we cannot approach this problem band-aid over a band-aid, one at a time. Rather start from a clean slate and approach this as a complete instituting a new system that has the ability to evolve in the future. Now, obviously, in an organization which is big, heavily matrixed, you are not the sole decision maker. There are multiple stakeholders who have to collectively decide. That was a best example of how you walk people through your vision, and one by one gather the input, the feedback, and come at a conclusion. And ultimately, what you're faced with is that yes, a lot of stakeholders have said yes, but they are not signing up for the accountability. It's the person who's driving that decision or collecting that decision is holding that accountability. So that comes, that comes across. That's a crossroad for you to feel either how do you say weighted because of that accountability, or feel empowered that come what may, what the decision is, you are at least making a decision, push things forward with what you know at that particular point of time. So that was my story where a couple of years ago I did get a go ahead. It took a year to build that system because we had to customize it with the vendors. Fast forward now, we are working hard to get that system into a business as usual phase, and that again is a challenge because there are stakeholders who are users and the customers of that system, and they do not give you any. They're not forgiving when it comes to, hey, we've implemented a new system and why is it not working the way it's supposed to. So I think communication of what is progressing, how we are instituting the feedback, how we are resolving the challenges, I think becomes equally important. So that's my journey on this, replatforming with a completely new system. As an example of where I've made multiple decisions and used communication as a tool to keep stakeholders in sync.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Can I pull on one thread there, Mayank? You mentioned
Absolutely.
something. You mentioned that sometimes when you are the person who's driving, you have the accountability.
Yes.
And you mentioned that for some folks you could see it as a lot of pressure, or you could see it as you're being empowered, right? And we've had the opportunity to talk to many folks in corporate America who, when they drive and have that accountability, but they depend on so many people, they feel more of that pressure. So any tips on how you can change your mindset from feeling pressure to feeling more empowered?
I think that's a great question, and thank you for asking that, Rajat. As I was explaining, when you come to that crossroads, you feel you feel the weight of that accountability, and you want to, take the path of lesser accountability. And I think that is where I would recommend the youngsters, as you're growing in your corporate career or even in your career professional journeys, feel excited about those crossroads, because I think those are going to come by very infrequently, but whenever they come, they actually build the grit in you, the character, the personality. You learn from the mistakes. You actually look back. There are plenty of times that I've looked back that, hey, all I could have done was take the path less accountable, and I would have been in a much happier place. But the amount of learning,
Yes.
whether I've made a mistake, whether I've done the right thing, the amount of learning that comes afterwards is something that is going to stick to you for a lifetime. And I know, in corporate, you kind of feel that pressure that if you make you're accountable. If you make if you screw up on something, then you can be easily made a scapegoat, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think if we disconnect ourselves from that, or that fright, I think that goes a long way versus keep drinking the Kool-Aid of that. Hey, I'm going to keep on taking the path less accountable, which is yes, easier, and it's going to give me more job security. But I think from your own personal development, and also for the benefit of the organization, you have to make bold moves. Otherwise, you're going to traverse at a much slower pace than where the industry or other industries are moving.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Mayank, right? Because like you said, when there's a fork in the road, you can make the easy choice or the hard choice.
Yes.
And, like someone said, easy choices, hard life, and hard choices, easy life. So if you make the hard choices, and you also made a good point, because many people do feel that, will I be scapegoated? But
Yes.
in that choice, like you said, is the opportunity for career growth, learning, and becoming a better leader, right? So great. Thank you for that. One question that comes up a lot, Mayank, is, people find it easier to manage folks in their team, right?
Yeah.
People report to them. People also kind of find it easier to, manage up and just work with their boss or their leader.
Right.
What is harder is influencing a peer or someone in a different group, right? So that any tips you have for the audience on how do you influence peers? Because you don't manage them, they are your equals. So any suggestions there?
I think. Look, that's also one of the hardest things to do, right? Influencing peers who all have their own tasks, their own scorecards, their goals. So how do I get onto their agenda, right? I mean, the old school mentality was that you have a group of people. You have multiple direct reports. Their goals should line up to your goals. Your goals should line up to your manager goals and to the organization, right? And that is one, I would say, the classic way of ensuring that you are, influencing, motivating, and directing your peers who are within the same umbrella of the organization. But I think in today's world, where the organizations are much flatter, you have more responsibility and accountability to drive a goal. I think to have, I'm going to go back to that point, to have that orientation and show them the vision is sort of very important. And I think I'm going to go back to your skills of communicating that vision, right? Because even like when you are communicating a vision, you don't want to sound like like this gung ho, highly optimistic, just visionary, but not have those execution skills to get there. So I'm gonna also supplement by saying, yes, have a good vision, but also have a really good execution plan. Have the right people on your team. Really invest early on in identifying what is the role for every individual on your team, even when they are a peer group. If you have built that strong team with very clear roles, responsibilities, and goals, obviously, good things happen. I've seen in my experience a lot of times when teams don't work well with each other is either the vision is not communicated clearly, or two, if people are not clear about what is it that they are putting to the table. So I think as a leader, that is very important.
Yeah. No, love the point about vision goes back to like the scorecard you mentioned, right? Everyone needs to be rowing in the same direction. So what advice or tips you would have to someone who has been trying to drive cross-functional collaboration or influence and it's not working for him or her, right? So what would you tell her?
Yeah, I mean that's a difficult to assess without knowing the situation, because the answer could be dependent on that very specific situation. But generically speaking, I would say common pitfalls in
Yeah.
cross-functional collaboration is frequent changes in goals, right? I think goals are one of those things where you have to be patient, give it time. I think we are living in a world where we are driven more, by numbers. We are driven more by the pressures of, can I keep increasing the goal? Can I keep moving the target sideways, back, front or back? I think that is something to be very cognizant of, that you're not moving your goals
Yeah.
very often. And I think another common pitfall is to keep a check on workloads. I think burnout is truly a real thing. In order to be working in a very collaborative, cohesive, matrixed environment, I think it is important for everyone to be, not operating in that zone of overwork, because that is when you're actually going in negative. That is when your ability to create or your creative frame of mind diminishes. And it is more about like, hey, I'm going to complete the task. And I think that's where that's a very common pitfall. So have a self check. I want leaders to have that check within their teams. And, if they are sensing that is happening, then collectively the leadership should, take a common decision. When to stop, when to take a break.
Yeah. No, the overwork point is a great point you mentioned, Mike, because like you said, right, the goals are getting more aggressive and the timelines are getting shorter. So any tips you have used in your own team or within your org to identify and work through burnout?
It's I don't want to say you're asking the wrong person, because like I started my career working for an absolute sweatshop. It was a private equity consulting firm where I was pulling in 80, 90, 100-hour weeks at a very early age. So I think you can call it that my grinding happened in that environment. And I started to believe, in order to be successful, you have to pull those hours. But as I'm getting older, as I'm having, more perspective on what truly drives you, I think the tip that I use is to first on myself, which is keep having a perspective, right? Like my family, my kids, they're a good perspective to make sure that I am connecting with them, after a certain point, and close out a work day or dedicate the weekend, for that very specific moment, no distraction. That's one that I use. Another one that I use, quite often is, do I have, have I myself put my work devices away? And that's really hard to do sometimes when you're hard pressed towards deadline. But trust me, if you do that once in a while, that can really reap benefits. And then for the team, to really take that time to connect with them at a personal level and hear their stories, and share your own personal stories. I think that relaxes a little bit to bring that human element out of the team. So these are the three things that I try to use.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. I mean, as a CEO of a startup, we also have at home like the 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. is sacred family time. Everyone in my company knows that. That's when we play board games and we cook dinner, and just that time is just sacrosanct away
Yeah.
from all kinds of work. And like you said, it having that perspective of family balances you and lets you keep going, right? It's I like to call it work-life harmony, not work-life balance, right? Because balance implies you're taking from one and giving to the other. So you mentioned communication, Mayank, as an important tool that you use, and we of course 100% agree with that at Present. What are some frameworks or tips you have used when you communicate cross-functionally to drive influence? If you can share some of your go-to techniques or frameworks, that'll be super helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to share very simple ones because I often feel the simpler ones are the ones that you keep because they're the ones I kept from my early days.
Yeah.
I think there's truly truly a power of what we call the power of three, right? If you can share a written communication in 3 bullet points, that's what I use as a framework, right? Like, given how much time us as leaders have, you
Yeah.
should be able to communicate in 3 bullet points or less. So that's one area that I use. Another one that I use is, in verbal communication, try to understand, or as I'm presenting, try to understand what is the context of that presentation. I think we often, and I still do that a lot of times, we get into the mode of what we want others to hear rather than knowing what is it that the other is wanting to get from you. And I think the trick is in a presentation to take frequent pauses and ask, am I on the right direction? Am I addressing your question? Am I addressing the objective? Right? That allows to pivot and be open to pivot, right? Like, just because I have a 10 slide deck, it doesn't mean that I have to cover all those 10 slides. Maybe there's just one slide that they wanted to hear, but unless and until you ask, you might not get that feedback. And then the last thing I'm going to suggest, which is what I use, is to be able during communication, whether it's a presentation or whether it's an email or a memo that you're sharing, look for feedback. Is this something that I think that's something that I really want to. I just said, I'm a student for life. That's an area that I'm working on. What are the ways to keep asking for feedback? That, hey, how did that communication land? Is this something that I can do differently next time?
Yeah.
And look for mentors, look for leaders who have that ability to assess from a third person perspective and share. I think that can really help drive your communication.
Awesome. That's great. Having spent 5 years at McKinsey, I believe in the power of three, just like you, Mayank. Your second point I thought was very interesting. The point about, if you have a 10-slide deck, be okay with pivoting. I'll just ask a question on behalf of the audience, right? Because many times it seems scary. You are usually in front of a senior executive audience. You have prepared those 10 slides. And if you pause and say, look, is there something else? They might take you in a whole nother direction, right? So any kind of tips from a mindset perspective or skill set so that people feel comfortable asking that? Because I 100% agree. It doesn't make sense to spend time on something no one wants to hear about. So how do you pivot?
I think no, I don't think there's a magic formula for that. I think it comes with experience. It comes with professional maturity. It comes with mistakes. It comes with self-introspection, and it also comes with the situation that you have planted yourself in. I think yes, pivoting is one of the hardest things to do, and to bring senior leadership back on track
Yeah.
is an even harder thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Because senior leadership, you have always like that sense that, oh, they are senior leaders, they must be saying something right, I should disturb them, I should. But I think if you take it from the perspective of uh, like, do I have that self belief that uh, perhaps the senior leadership who I'm presenting to is either taking it on taking the discussion on a tangent. Then there are ways to politely address that. Hey, by the way, uh, we have 10 minutes and 10 minutes remaining, and what I wanted to get out of this presentation was X, Y, and Z. And I don't think that we are addressing X, Y, and Z unless you tell me that there is another set of objectives, A, B, and C, which is, I guess, where you're going towards. We can pivot there. What do you think? And be ready to make that pivot, because ultimately, like, you don't want to be pushy to run your agenda. If the leader is taking for the right reasons, be ready to pivot.
Yeah. I think it's a great practical tip that our readers can take away. Just go back to how much time is left, and this is what we wanted to do. If you want to do something else, that's okay, but let's do it deliberately instead of doing it without being deliberate about it, right? So I love that tip, Mayank. So anything else about cross-functional collaboration, Mayank, you want to share with the audience, which you think might be helpful to folks?
I think I think you asked all the great questions. I think cross-functional collaboration, again, there's no magic pill you can take. I think you land yourself in those situations, and you learn over time. Be very aware, right? Be very aware what you did was right. How did you react? I think don't overthink if you've made a mistake. Rather think, what was it that resulted you to take that path? And I think that will give you a lot of confidence that, yes, mistake was just within the remit of that particular, it was not really a life mistake, right?
Yeah.
It's not that you're going to, you're going to be reprimanded or, fined for that mistake. It was based on what you knew. That was a decision that you made.
Yeah.
And I think the power should be shifted in terms of the decision rather than, hey, I've made a mistake. I think that would be a tip. But once again, it's a little nuanced. You can only, you appreciate once you have, you force yourself to think back on what led you to that decision.
Yeah. No, I love that, Mayank. It's not about the mistake; it's about the decision that led to it. As a poker player, we always say that, hey, it doesn't matter how the cards fall. Go back and think about, did you make the right mistake? Did you make the right decision? Because there is a certain probability for you might be unlucky or things won't work out. But all you can do is improve your decision making, and life, of course, over time is a series of decisions that you've made, right? So
yeah,
I love.
You're always. I mean, like, yes, exactly. I mean, I would say that there are a number of times when I think back and I just say to myself, Mayank, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Things sometimes are out of your control. So be it, right? That's life.
That's life, and you made the best decision with the information set you had at that time, and we can learn from it, right? No, awesome, that's great. So, Mayank, let's switch to our Quickfire. Okay. So these are 5 questions that you don't know about. I'm going to go through them and just tell me the first word or sentence, that first thought that comes to your mind. All right? Ready to go?
Sounds good.
All right. Question 1: what's one word you would use to describe the art and science of communication?
Anticipation.
Anticipation. How is AI changing the way we communicate?
Productivity gains, yes. Ability to communicate what you actually intend from your soul, not yet.
Okay, fair enough. What is a common communication myth you wish people would unlearn? Unlearn.
Communication myth that people would unlearn. Talking a lot or covering all the text on the slide, like going 100% of the content that you're delivering.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, don't try to cover the whole slide, hit the main points. If you could give one piece of advice to someone preparing for a big presentation in a corporate setting to an executive team, what would that one piece of advice be for that big presentation?
Know your objective, know the time that you have to present, and look for productivity in generating the content for those slides. How succinctly can you communicate? I think that's the name of the game.
All right. And then what is something, Mayank, you wish you knew about business communication when you started your career?
That you're gonna make a ton of mistakes. So don't be harsh on yourself.
No, well said. With that, Mayank, thank you so much. It was an incredible pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise on how do we influence across complex organizations. I think you gave us a lot of very practical nuggets, Mayank, and I think that gives the listeners a roadmap to build trust, drive alignment, and make impact, no matter what level they sit within the company. So before we wrap up, Mayank, any final thoughts for our listeners? And if they want to learn more about you and connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, LinkedIn is the best way to find me. I'm always, looking for, for opportunities to share some of my learnings. I love mentoring folks, so please reach out. You may not get an immediate answer, but I am usually pretty good with responding back. But look, at the end of the day, Rajat, what you're doing with these podcasts is something amazing. I think you're connecting people, you're connecting thoughts. That is a wonderful thing to do. And, pleasure is all mine. Quite honored to be a part of your podcast. And thanks again for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again, Mayank. Thank you for joining us. So next week, folks, we'll continue exploring the art of communication and leadership with yet another incredible guest. Until then, let's think deeply, speak simply. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit present.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.